Welcome back. Thanks for being here. This video is about selling more as a freelancer. And now I think common with what you've heard from other people, anyone can sell as a freelancer, even if you're not a socially gregarious extrovert. Not only can you sell, you can upsell and charge more. And I'm going to talk about some of the personal and wider factors that might be able to make this happen. Many of you listening won't want to accept that anyone can get better at selling, but by talking about creating a repeatable and reliable sales process and talking about why people buy things and reframing our view of sales, we can see how we can become better. Even if you already have a successful sales strategy, sales process, sometimes you can get a bit too comfortable and complacent selling. So this video is for you too. I'm also going to create a separate related video on the bricks, some of the geopolitical factors involved in freelancing maybe, which I will leave a card to now. I think that's worth sticking around for or skipping over to if you want to go have a look at that. So chapter 1, non-icky selling strategies. The problem that I've found, and maybe you have found as well, is that a lot of sales tactics, sales strategies, is that they sometimes can give the person deploying them and the person receiving them slightly icky feeling of disgust. Maybe not all the time, but this is especially true of the aggressive, persistent sales approach that is hungry and doesn't listen to variations of the response that go no or not now or whatever else. So number one is talking less or writing less and listening more and reading more, depending on where you're meeting the client, your potential client. And it's tempting to think that if we have the answers, we can finish people's sentences, but this is a big no-no. If we do this, we may very well miss them sharing some important information with us, with you, intentionally or otherwise. And number two is asking open-ended questions. This is really any question that can't be answered with one word, like, can you tell me about your business? What are your top priorities that you would like to achieve with this piece of work? What are your top priorities with your business right now? And what challenges do you face in achieving those priorities or your priorities? How do you judge new products or services? Let's just move on swiftly to number three. Have 2 or 3 big questions in mind. So you want to go into your conversation, your first initial meeting, if you're having a Google Meet, a Zoom call, or meeting them in person, going into that conversation with some big questions in advance. These might be things like, what would it take for you to hire me to carry out this project? Or why do you buy products or services from this person or that company? This might seem hugely audacious, ballsy to say things like that, but you don't have to exactly ask these questions, or in fact any of the questions I've raised, in exactly the way I've worded them. But your mission is to deploy these questions or some variation thereof at some point, or at least find the answers to them in your conversation. And now number 4 and 5 of non-icky sales strategies, hopefully non-icky. When they say something that's clearly important to them, you repeat it back to them. As I've said, talk less. Asking a lot of questions and getting them to do most of the talking helps. Repeating back to them what they're saying so they feel listened to and will in fact engage further with you. Obviously don't overdo it with the mirroring and the repetition, otherwise that will be odd. But the simple act of mimicry will not only endear the other person to you, it will also prompt them to keep talking. And so added onto this is number 5, things like tell me more about that. This is what some people refer to as a power phrase. And this simple phrase signals to the other person that you know what they've said is important and you want to hear more about it. Can you give me another example? Is another useful phrase, as it encourages the other person to put into words their problem by sharing a real life example of it. Chapter 2, selling cheat sheet, if you will. As I said, you don't necessarily have to be a gregarious extrovert or to have the most riz, as Gen Z likes to say, to be good at selling. Wharton Business School professor Adam Grant found that of all personality types, it is actually ambiverts, those who are equally placed between intro and extroversion, who make the best salespeople. If you're someone who considers themselves to be more reserved, it's no use trying to be someone you're not. Of course, we can all push ourselves a little bit more to be outgoing when we're outside, but often we're meeting people behind our devices as freelancers, so you can be forgiven, even thrive, adapting your sales techniques to suit your personality. Here are some confidence boosting cheats, if you like, for making sales work for you. And so number 1 is rebranding or renaming selling. If the thought of what you're doing as selling doesn't sit well with you for any reason, you can stop thinking of it as selling. This is not as feeble a tip as it seems. You can say to yourself or to anyone that you're not here to force people to buy something that they don't want or need. And this ultimately makes you look stronger. You can tell yourself that you're educating or sharing information. And you can also create a lot of value from something you create once and distribute many times, like templates, a one sheet or a tip, and of course, videos. I'm sure you've heard this before. And if people start to see positive results from this free information, they will likely endear to you and trust you more. So number 2 in the cheat sheet is believing in what you're providing. And it might seem like really trite advice that you've heard 1,000 times. You don't necessarily need to believe in yourself. It would be a big net positive in the long term. And it would be worth looking at emotional self-regulation strategies to help you feel less damped up or less shy if this or any number of things is holding you back. And God knows I need that as well. However, if advice that relies on telling yourself that you're good at something doesn't seem to be working, you don't have to lie to yourself that you're good at selling. Instead, tell yourself that the thing that you're providing is good. This can get you out of your own way and lets your enthusiasm for the product or the service come through. Number 3, it's a bit cheeky. It involves watching other people sell to you and tuning into the experience. You may have no actual intention of buying from them, obviously, but by observing the experience and unpacking what makes it a largely positive or negative experience to you, you can write those down. And of course, these are largely subjective and prone to error, but you can still draw lessons on what you like and what you don't like. So, knowing what they'll need, your potential client. Harvard Business School marketing professor Theodore Levitt has said that people don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. If you know your customers and the outcomes they want, you will know why they buy from you. Anticipating their needs won't be very difficult. So a makeup artist is not simply there to do makeup. On a wedding day, she's there to make the bride beautiful, to provide stellar outcomes. So if you're an authority or knowledgeable about your area in providing a product or service that you've been asked to provide, the value comes obviously from providing the things the client won't anticipate when they need what they need. And it comes from doing things they are also unwilling or unable to do. So assuming that your client can do some of what they're asking of you, that they're just busy or unwilling, you're also saving them time too, of course. We shouldn't let people undermine our professional skills because they can do it themselves, they think. But if your service is not as technical or as complex as some other services, we should also, feel good about what we're doing, that it's not simply just hack work. But there's obviously things that we can do in auditing our skills and upskilling, which is for another time. Part 2 of this video is diving a little bit more deeply into knowing what to say when you're approached by a client. I know I touched on this part in part 1 of the video, but more an overview. So when someone first approaches you with freelance work, they usually have some idea of what they want. Sometimes they don't. I tend to ask a few more questions, like how soon they need it, as well as other open-ended questions that I touched upon in part 1 of this video about business priorities and what they'd like to achieve with the work. Sometimes someone approaches, but they only have a seed of an idea and they want me to provide more details about how I would actually go about doing the task, almost like a mini treatment in the messages, if you will. I've never built for this. I know some freelancers that would be a little bit more curt, a little bit more stumpf, and would be unwilling to discuss the idea for free. But as I've said, we have to listen and build out ideas, otherwise we're unlikely to get clients, I think. Sometimes you're implicitly or explicitly asked to justify your experience and expertise. Sometimes people ask for work, CVs, whether you've worked in so-and-so area or on so-and-so topic. I would next, after this is all sort of taken care of, I would ask them to provide all the relevant and non-relevant documents, finalize the price and send out an offer. And then once that's done, I would get to work. And this is usually all done in the context of Fiverr and other marketplace sites, which make it super straightforward and seamless. So I'm going to share with you a series of messages that were sent back and forth to me and a potential client who did in fact become a client, and they wanted me to provide some educational blog for him, for his agency. But it eventually culminated in me sending him an offer for a few articles after a few messages, and that subsequently grew and grew. We went back and forth. I did some more and more work for him, and I was able to scale up the rate that I was able to offer to him. And you'll see with this one, I was able to offer 6 articles at this rate. You'll see in this offer that some keywords are doing some heavy lifting for organic growth, like high performing and SEO optimized. The writing I was doing had to make its return on investment back after all. And I had to provide examples of the previous SEO work I'd done for this client. And if there were any gaps in my knowledge about SEO, I would have to handle it in the doing of the work. But for the most part, I felt genuinely confident. If you don't have any experience doing SEO or anything else for that matter, I don't advise you to lie. But obviously, I do advise you to try it. So you might say that you feel confident and able to do it. But for other things that are more technically complex and more difficult, intrinsically, this is probably a no-no to adopt. There are loads of things I've looked at in a skills audit of the things I don't know and that I would like to learn, and shouldn't have any excuses about, really. Obviously, things are time consuming and expensive, but that is what it is. And so at the end of this message, you'll also notice that I thanked the client for the ongoing relationship, but did not thank them for the ongoing work, as that might have seemed desperate, to be a bit frank, and viewing them, the person, as a means to an end, which was the paycheck, rather than treating them as an end in themselves. That's what Immanuel Kant talks about in his ethics anyway, not that I've read Kantian ethics. He and I both know that we live in the world of money where everyone needs it, but it is important to appreciate people for who they are as an end in themselves rather than treating them instrumentally, I find as well. So that's that. I hope you've gained something from this video and that you can use it for your own selling too. Let me know what you think is the strongest and weakest things from this video down below, and I will see you soon.